It was one of the boldest fantasy investments in streaming history, a sprawling adaptation of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time, spanning continents, cultures, and generations of fans. And for a moment, it looked like Amazon had its answer to Game of Thrones. But then, the pattern frayed. Season 4 was cancelled. Fans erupted. And some began to ask, did this decision signal a deeper problem for Amazon Prime Video? Let's unravel the truth behind the cancellation, the fan fallout, and whether the Wheel of Time's end actually hurt Amazon, or simply revealed what was already broken in the streaming model. The Wheel of Time started as a crown jewel. From the beginning, the Wheel of Time was positioned not just as another fantasy adaptation, but as Amazon Prime Video's crown jewel. In the competitive streaming wars, it wasn't enough for Amazon to simply have content. It needed landmark content. Something that could rival HBO's Game of Thrones or Netflix's growing fantasy arsenal. Robert Jordan's saga offered just that, a 14-book behemoth that spanned cultures, languages, philosophies, and thousands of years of fictional history. It was deep, expansive, and most importantly, unadapted on a major scale. Amazon wasn't just buying a story, they were purchasing a legacy and an opportunity to build a franchise. The money reflected that ambition. Over $260 million, 0 cents, was invested across the first 2 seasons. Filming spanned multiple countries, with sprawling sets that recreated the White Tower, the Aiel Waste, and ancient battlefields with cinematic scope. The studio embraced the challenge, and the initial marketing push promised that this was no half-hearted gamble. It was the fantasy epic for a new era. When Season 1 premiered, it did massive numbers, reportedly becoming one of Amazon's most watched shows ever at the time. The message was clear. The pattern had begun to spin on a grand scale. Season 3 delivered but quietly. By the time The Wheel of Time reached its 3rd season, something rare had happened in television. It found its footing. The performances matured, the pacing found its rhythm, and the characters stopped feeling like roles and started feeling like people. Rand became more than a confused farm boy. Moiraine's burden deepened. Nynaeve's grief turned into flame. Season 3 was the show's creative peak, with scenes like Egwene's defiance in captivity and Rand's dangerous flirtation with the One Power showing real dramatic weight. Critics noticed. With a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, the 3rd season was lauded as a major improvement, even by fans who had been skeptical of the show's changes to the lore. But Amazon didn't treat it like a victory. Marketing was subdued. There were no viral campaigns, no major Comic-Con presence, no press tours pushing the cast to late-night audiences. As a result, the show returned not with a bang, but a whisper. It dropped off Nielsen's streaming charts in less than a month, not because of quality, but because most people didn't know it had returned. In an era where visibility equals survival, the silence around Season 3 became a death sentence. It was the best season no one saw. The cancellation sparked a fan backlash. When Amazon officially canceled The Wheel of Time after 3 seasons, what followed wasn't quiet disappointment, it was a storm. For a series like this, built not on gimmicks or trends, but on decades of loyalty and slow-burning narrative arcs, the cancellation struck with the force of balefire. This wasn't just a content cut, this was a betrayal of trust, a violation of a contract, unspoken yet deeply felt, between the studio and its audience. From the beginning, fans had been told this was a journey worth taking, not a casual binge, not a one-season wonder, but a long walk through prophecy, madness, power, and sacrifice. The very structure of The Wheel of Time as a narrative resists quick payoff. It is cyclical, it is layered, it is a series about change that takes time. Amazon promised a full turning of that wheel, to sever it before Demise Wells, before Egwene's rise, before the cleansing of Sidene. Wasn't just cutting a show short, it was breaking faith. And the response was immediate and furious. Hashtags like Save Wheel of Time lit up Twitter/X within hours. Fan forums exploded with theories, grief, and rage. Reddit threads multiplied with thousands of upvotes demanding answers, organizing campaigns, strategizing outreach to other platforms. It wasn't just digital noise, it was a movement. Within days, petitions had gathered tens of thousands of signatures, with fans urging Amazon to reconsider or calling on Netflix, HBO, and even Apple TV to step in. But more than petitions, there were personal decisions. Longtime Prime subscribers, some of whom joined the service just to watch The Wheel of Time, began canceling. Many posted proof, stating clearly that they no longer trusted Amazon to support long-form storytelling. Others paused upcoming purchases, left one-star reviews on unrelated content, or wrote impassioned letters to Amazon studios. The cancellation turned loyal viewers into activists. Why such a visceral reaction? Because Wheel of Time fans aren't casual. They are invested. Many have read the books multiple times. Some grew up with the series, passed it down to children, taught its lessons in classrooms, or found comfort in its pages during hard years. They didn't just want to watch the show, they wanted to see it through. They needed to witness the arcs that shaped them, rendered with care and conclusion. Amazon's misstep was in underestimating that passion. They treated the show like data. The fans see it as myth. And if there's one thing Wheel of Time fans know how to do, it's endure. They will wait. They will fight. They will organize, as they always have. Because in a world ruled by cycles, this doesn't feel like an end. It feels like a beginning. Did Amazon Prime actually suffer from the cancellation? In the aftermath of the Wheel of Time's cancellation, fans flooded social media with anger, disappointment, and in many cases subscription cancellations. But amidst the uproar, a critical question emerged. Did Amazon Prime Video actually feel the impact? Did the decision to cut short one of its flagship fantasy properties leave a measurable dent in its empire? On the surface, the answer seems to be no. Amazon Prime Video is not just a streaming service, it's a pillar of a trillion-dollar retail ecosystem. Its value isn't solely tied to shows and movies, but to the holistic convenience it offers. Free shipping, shopping perks, Kindle benefits, and more. Unlike standalone platforms like Netflix or Hulu, Amazon can afford to treat its video content as a value add rather than a primary driver of subscriptions. In that model, even the cancellation of a $100 million 0-cents prestige fantasy series is just a small ripple in a much larger ocean. But below that surface calm, something did shift. The cancellation of The Wheel of Time sent a message that Prime Video may not finish what it starts. And in a streaming world increasingly dependent on brand loyalty, that kind of message lingers. Fans who had been promised a long-term investment, who had stuck with the show through its early missteps and finally began to see its potential realized in Season 3, felt abandoned. That betrayal doesn't vanish with the next release, it burrows deep. For a studio building its reputation as a home for genre storytelling, such breaches of trust are more dangerous than any single canceled series. They erode faith. They discourage audiences from investing in future epics, from binging early seasons, from recommending shows that may never see their endings. And in the slow churn of subscription cycles, that erosion eventually shows in retention numbers and social media sentiment. So while Amazon's quarterly reports may not list the Wheel of Time's absence as a crisis, the long-term perception shift is real. Genre fans are not passive. They track completion rates. They remember who finishes what. And when a platform becomes known for pulling the plug before the climax, they simply stop pressing play. In the end, the loss may not be financial, but it is foundational. And if Amazon hopes to lead the next era of fantasy storytelling, it will need to reckon with what was broken here. Because trust, once lost, is not easily regained. Not in the age of the internet, and certainly not in the age of legends. Amazon's fantasy strategy may have backfired. Amazon didn't just invest in The Wheel of Time, it staked its fantasy legacy on two franchises, The Wheel of Time and The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. On paper, this dual approach made sense. Two epic worlds, two fan bases, two tentpoles to dominate the genre. But in practice, the execution felt lopsided. While Rings of Power received unprecedented marketing, including Super Bowl ads, immersive VR tie-ins, and massive press tours, The Wheel of Time was treated like its lesser sibling. Season 3, arguably its most narratively significant, was quietly released with minimal promotional support. No massive trailers, no global red carpet events, no dedicated featurettes highlighting its evolution. This disparity created resentment. Fans noticed. The perception grew that Amazon had already chosen its favorite child, and Wheel was being quietly written out. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant. In entertainment, perception is reality, and when a company shows it's willing to abandon even its critically acclaimed projects, it begins to erode the trust needed to build future loyalty. The streaming model's inherent flaws were exposed. If there's one thing the Wheel of Time's cancellation highlights more than anything, it's the inherent cruelty of the modern streaming model. Shows are greenlit with grand promises. Budgets are ballooned, casts are international, but unless the results come quickly and trend virally, they are cut down with alarming speed. Long-form storytelling, once the crown jewel of TV's golden age, is now a liability. The Wheel of Time was built for the long haul. Its strength lies in arcs that take seasons to bloom. Egwene doesn't become Amerlin in a single episode. Rand's descent into madness is a slow burn. Matt's transformation from rogue to general is earned over time. But the streaming model doesn't reward patience. It rewards noise. It rewards spikes. It rewards binging and forgetting. And that's where the show failed. Not because of its content, but because of the system around it. A system that punishes the very structure Wheel needed to succeed. What these shows still accomplished, expanded. Even as cancellation casts a long shadow, the Wheel of Time accomplished what many said was impossible. It made Robert Jordan's world real. For 3 seasons, audiences were transported into a realm of infinite cycles, elemental magic, ancient betrayals, and stubborn hope. The White Tower stood tall. The ways whispered with danger. Tel'aran'rhiod blurred dreams and reality. It wasn't always perfect, but it was there, tangible, watchable, alive. The series took one of the most metaphysical, character-dense fantasy epics ever written and gave it form. It visualized weaves of the One Power in a way that felt artful, tactile, even sacred. It translated gendered magic into stunning cinematography. It showed us how power feels, not just how it looks. More importantly, it put women at the heart of the story. Not as sidekicks or tokens, but as forces of will, history, and revolution. Moiraine was not a guide, she was the foundation. Nynaeve wasn't just angry, she was traumatized, healing, divine. Egwene wasn't waiting to be saved, she was breaking chains with intellect and dignity. Few fantasy shows have centered women this richly, and that alone gave Wheel a tone all its own. Even in cancellation, it proved that high fantasy can be about more than swords and spells. It can be about healing, about identity, about what it costs to carry the future. The long-term legacy of the Wheel of Time. While its television run may have ended prematurely, the Wheel of Time leaves behind a legacy far greater than its episode count. In a streaming age dominated by breakneck pacing, viral twists, and instant gratification, this series dared to be different. It embraced slowness. It leaned into introspection. It treated prophecy not as a gimmick, but as a burden. And in doing so, it cracked open a new lane for what fantasy television could be. It showed that epic storytelling doesn't have to sacrifice character depth for scale, that we can care deeply about the quiet grief of a stubborn healer or the layered guilt of a man marked by destiny, just as much as we care about explosions and battles. In an industry increasingly obsessed with spectacle and immediacy, Wheel of Time proved there's still power in myth. Real myth, the kind that unfolds in riddles and ages in the spaces between action scenes. The show's visual identity, its glowing weaves of the One Power, its shadow-soaked visions, its ancient iconography etched into every costume and artifact, will ripple forward. Other creators will draw from it, not because it was flawless, but because it dared to translate something once thought unfilmable into a new medium. Future showrunners will dissect both its triumphs and its flaws to better understand how to adapt layered, metaphysical fiction. And the fans will not forget. Through essays, podcasts, rewatch events, and social campaigns, they will carry its flame. The petitions won't stop, the lore deep dives will only deepen, and in the quiet spaces of online forums and fantasy circles, people will still speak of Moiraine, of Rand's torment, of the Forsaken yet to be revealed. The show might be off-air, but it isn't dead. Perhaps its greatest legacy, however, is what it gave to those who hadn't yet read the books. For countless viewers, this was their first step into Jordan's world. And while the show didn't reach the last battle, it did what every adaptation dreams of doing. It sent its audience back to the source. It turned casual watchers into readers, and those readers will discover that the end wasn't taken from them. It was simply waiting, bound in paper and prophecy, for them to finish it themselves. And in that sense, the Wheel of Time didn't fail. It fulfilled its purpose. Final thoughts. The Wheel of Time did not fail because it lacked story. It failed because streaming platforms lack patience. It didn't die because fans didn't care. It died because corporations no longer see stories, they see spikes. But the pattern doesn't stop. Threads lost in one age are woven again in another. This story, this cast, this world, they may yet return. And even if they don't, what they gave us was more than 3 seasons of television. It was a glimpse of what fantasy can be when it dares to think in ages instead of episodes. The wheel turns, and one day, it may turn back to us.